Hello, and welcome to Shalom Letters podcast with the Brian Newman, author, lyricist, scholar, and veteran. I'm Melissa Collins, ministry partner and friend of Brian's, also the voice of Miss Esther Abahill of the Torahtown cartoon series found on YouTube. So welcome. This is our premiere podcast of Shalom Letters, where participants can write into our show and we share commentary, primarily dream interpretation from a biblical perspective. Throughout each episode, I'll be interviewing Brian and presenting him with the dreams and letters submitted by our audience, and then let the Spirit lead. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Melissa. Thank you for that amazing intro.
Well, good. I'm so honored to be doing this podcast with you.
I never knew I was cool, so I'm appreciative.
So let's kick this thing off right, since this is our very first podcast together. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started in dream interpretation?
So I'm Brian Newman. I grew up in Tennessee, if you can't tell by the accent. I joined the Air Force right before 9/11, and then I got moved to Germany, Texas, Mississippi, then Germany for 9/11. Then I was in Oklahoma, and I separated and went to college in Nashville and some other places for a while. I have a history degree, a German degree. Don't ask me to speak it. I forgot everything. And I have some training in human resources, the military, and then I got a master's in human services, marriage and family. So it's something you get along the way to a counseling license. So I've got about 2 years of counselor training, and went to a little seminary for a little bit. And what else did I want to throw in there? Oh, yeah, the dream interpretation stuff. So that's like formal education, but the really useful things have been scriptural education.
Mm-hmm.
On the dreams, it was about 2014, I started having some dreams I didn't understand at all, and ended up going through a divorce a month or two later, being homeless for a little bit in Athens, Georgia, and it was just a terrible time. It was like one of the hardest years of my life. And then I miraculously got moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. I thought I was supposed to go for a while. My friends are telling me, Brian, you're supposed to be in Chattanooga. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't have a car. I don't have a job there. I don't have a savings account. I don't know anybody there that I know of. I was stuck in at least for 6 more months, and miraculously, 3 weeks later, I'm in Chattanooga. Like, okay, God, okay, thank you. And so the first Tuesday I'm in Chattanooga, Perry Stone's Omega Center International was opening. It's a big international ministry center. I mean, it's huge. They've been trying to build it for 10 years. And Perry Stone is, pastor. He's like a Pentecostal pastor, goes all over the world, traveling, speaking.
I love Perry.
Sold millions of books, millions of viewers. And apparently he lives in 20 miles from Chattanooga in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. So I go to this opening thing. I walk in the door. I'm so depressed. It's scary. It's really, really bad. I have depression, anxiety. That guy knows I was in the military. So it was really bad. It's January or February. It's crazy cold. I don't know anybody in town. And I walk in the door, and this red hair and blue eyes and tattoos everywhere, wearing like basketball shorts in the middle of winter, walks up and just throws his arm around me. I don't know who it is. I've never met any of these people. Doesn't even say hello. Throws his arms around me. Said, Jesus loves you, dude. Okay, thank you. And he's just still squeezing me like he knows me. And then he just starts talking. He's like, oh, God wants me to tell you, you're going to start having dreams. And you're going to have a TV show. And you have a radio show. You're going to write a book about marriage. And you quit drinking sweet tea. It's bad for your kidneys. And all this stuff. He's just like a rant. And I'm like, okay, what's your name? His name's Ryan, apparently. And I started having more and more dreams. I didn't understand any of them. I just started having them. And it's like, okay, well, that part's right. Now what do I do with them? So John Paul Jackson was a minister back 80s, 90s, 2000s. He started teaching people how to interpret dreams. I never knew that. I knew he had all these videos about different things he thought was going to happen in the United States, and like soul versus spirit, destiny, these kind of spiritual topics. He had a little TV show that owns, I think, Marcus and Joni's TV station. So he had a TV show on their station, but it wasn't on anymore, but the reruns are on YouTube. So I watched all these episodes of this TV show for like a year. Never knew the man knew anything about dreams. And I'm having these weird dreams I can't explain. And then I saw one day, oh, he does dreams. That's interesting. So I click on it, I start watching them. And I watch every single one he has. And I start taking notes all the time because I couldn't afford to go to the classes. So I just started taking notes left and right. And he had passed away like 6 months before I started the dream stuff.
Mm.
Left off is when I started having dreams and started learning this stuff. Because I was watching reruns of this guy who passed away. And I did that for like a year or two. And I had a dream journal. And I started asking people what they thought and why they thought it. And I met my friend Christy Smith. She's in Tanzania right now as a missionary. And she would kind of go over with me this and that and how that works together and these kind of things, ask her questions. So she kind of mentored me in dreams. And then I finally took his class and I got my little certificate on the wall. Because if you go to streamsministries.com, streamsministries.com, they have several classes and they have like 2 or 3 on dream interpretation or similar topics. So after like 3 years of doing my own, I finally took the actual class. And I met another dream interpreter here in town. And then I met another one. So apparently there are other people who do this, but they're just hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
I've only met one other male. And the interesting about the dreams is it really gives you a compassion sometimes for people that have dreams they don't understand. Because I had a dream where my youngest daughter was grown up, but her eyes are completely blue. They're brown in real life, but I mean blue, like the whole eyeball is blue. Like there's no pupil, there's no iris. It's just a big blue thing, like a marble. As you know, marbles very well. It was like a very turquoise blue marble. And I knew from growing up, like, oh my gosh, that means someone's blind. My daughter's going to grow up. She's going to be blind because her eyes are like totally blue. And she had this giant Bible she's reading from. And it's like, like 3 feet wide, like a Braille Bible would be. Oh, that's a Braille Bible, I bet, because it's huge. And her eyes are blue. So she's going to be blind one day. And I was freaking out for like 6 months because I didn't know, oh, wait, that means she's going to have a revelatory gifting. Like she's going to be prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to make the Bible readable, understandable for people. She'll have a big understanding of it. Because I was thinking, oh my gosh, her eyes are blue. It's a big book. She's blind. God, don't let this happen. I was in a panic. And then like a year and a half later, after moving to Chattanooga, this is when I was getting divorced. Just a year and a half later, I moved to Chattanooga, meet this guy, and then I started watching YouTube videos, and it hits me one day, oh, you're goober. She's going to be prophetic.
Man, that is just a fantastic example of not only for true biblical dream interpretation, but any kind of biblical interpretation in general, without the right information and without the right, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess perspective and putting it in that biblical lens. We can misinterpret and we can twist things sometimes unknowingly, just like you worrying for 6 months about your daughter when that's not what the message really was. So what a great example on just the importance of true interpretation.
And if you post a dream, people that don't understand it will accuse you of all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up in court over posting 2 of mine. And then people don't understand. You were there. You were like my character witness. It's like, no, that's not something he would do. It's a dream. It's a symbol. It's a parable. Mm-hmm. It's not a literal thing. And so dreams are very important to realize they're symbols, they're parables. They're not literal things. And also you have to remember too, like if you post it out there too publicly, like I did, everyone's going to put their own spin on it. And you'll also get a ton of people who say they're believers, but they're up to their necks in New Age.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get some demonic interpretation for you or some secular interpretation or just saying something out of their own kind of religious lens that makes no sense at all. So you have to be kind of careful who you share them with. I wouldn't say lock them down, but like I started a private group if I wanted to do a dream. It's like the people I wanted to help me interpret could see it, but not the whole world. Right. Those influences without some kind of biblical guidance, you're going to get everything under the sun. And that's why so much stuff at the church is. We don't believe in that anymore, so we don't talk about it. Well, if someone's experiencing like a prophetic gifting, they will find someone who can explain it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if the church won't do it, it's probably going to be the New Age store.
Right. The enemy has a counterfeit for everything. And if you aren't familiar and you don't have that biblical standard to measure it up against, you can easily be deceived. I mean, you take counterfeit $100 bills, they're counterfeit, but they look so close to the real thing on purpose. So we can all easily be deceived without that standard of the Bible. So great advice on being careful. You have to have that discernment on especially those comments. Social media, it's wild these days.
And it's so condemning. Everybody's just like lying in wait to accuse you of something all the time. Is this no matter what your dream is? And it shows that people have like a bad eye. In Hebrew, they have a good eye and a bad eye. Eye is good, your whole body's good. If your eye's bad, your whole body's bad. Having a good eye or a bad eye there's generosity and stinginess with money and resources, but it's also about your opinion of others. Like you're looking to see the best of someone that's having a good eye. If they're 5 minutes late, they're probably stuck in traffic. If you have a bad eye, though, they're just being irresponsible again. You're just looking for some way to accuse them. And that's having a bad eye. And Jesus talked about that. If your eye's bad, your whole body's bad. So it's going to affect everything. And the body of the believers is going to affect everything. And some people have that with dreams. Or they look at a dream, and it's just the worst possible case scenario about this person. And they get venomous. So it's really important not to take that personally either. If you share a dream with someone who doesn't understand interpretation or the scriptures, that's generally their go-to. If they were raised in church, but they have no grid for it, that's kind of where it ends up at a lot.
Yeah. And, sometimes a quick Google search, I'll throw that in there as well. We've all heard, if you're having a medical symptom, don't hop on there and Google it. And I would say that probably stands true for dream interpretation as well. I would steer clear of the first thing that pops up on Google. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's like lab coat syndrome. Medical students think they have every disease they study. It's got like one of the 20 traits, so you must have it and you're dying in 6 months. And then Google dream interpretation is very extremely new age. But even if it says Christian or Jewish, it's still heavily tinted by New Age concepts usually.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, that doesn't just apply to dream interpretation. There's a lot of things out there that has that Christian label on it or Jewish label on it. I guess I see it more so with the Christian label since that's the denominator religion that I grew up in. But, just because it has that label on it, it can be a counterfeit too. It's not necessarily that's why we have to test everything. Is that right?
Exactly. Test everything. It's like 119 Ministries. Test everything. Or like Lex Meyer has with unlearn.com. It says, unlearn the lies. It's like you think you know this, but you have to unlearn what you think you know. And then 119 test everything by the scriptures, because Psalm 119 is the longest chapter in the Bible, and it's all about God's law. And God's law is how you test what's God and what isn't, because He doesn't contradict Himself. He's not a divine schizophrenic, where He just says this and He says something contrary, and then He goes back to the first thing He said, and then He can't make up His mind. He's not neurotic. He's perfectly consistent. And He doesn't change.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I'm actually glad you mentioned that. So 119 Ministries, Lex Meyer with Unlearned, Jim Staley for Passion with Truth, Bill Cloud, Jacob's 10. I love that ministry.
You're in Cleveland too, right down the street.
Yeah, they are in Cleveland too. Cannot wait to visit that fellowship in person. I stream every Shabbat, but one of these days I will be there in person.
We have Nehemiah Restoration Fellowship, which got co-founders of here in town too, and Cleveland, Tennessee has got 5 or 6 congregations. I've never seen this many Torah observant people, Torah observant Christians, Messianic Jews, Hebrew root people, whatever you call yourself. They're everywhere here. I mean, I went to the gas station. There's some lady at the post office, and there's somebody at Walmart, and everybody's got tassels on.
I know, it's like Zit everywhere. I love it.
A little Jerusalem or Zit City. Which one do you want to call it?
Oh, I love that. Well, okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing your background. I think that that definitely lends some credibility to some of the people who may be tuning in that haven't had the privilege to meet you yet.
Hmm.
Um, well, I guess actually before I get started, I'll give a little bit about how you and I met.
Yeah.
Funny enough, was actually on Facebook. We met on Facebook and had a lot of common friends, had a lot of common interests. We both love the Lord immensely, and so automatically, that brought a connection there. But I think it was definitely a divine connection. Even more than that, we were fast friends, to
Hmm.
say the least. And how long do you think we actually were friends on Facebook before we met in person? Was it very long?
It was like 3 weeks because so as few people know, I don't cook, but I love to eat, which is kind of a paradigm. And he saw me. So Melissa posted the first thing I ever saw
That's
was this
right.
whole table full of pies she made. Like this posted Thanksgiving, it's like a week before Thanksgiving. And there's just a long table full of pies. I'm like, please tell me you're local and you need a friend. So I added her. I was like, where do you live? And she's like, Kentucky. I'm like, yeah. That's drivable. So this was like in November, like mid-November, and we met on December 12th. I remember because it would have been my sixth or seventh wedding anniversary, but I just gotten divorced. Just found a place to live. I was like homeless like 3 weeks, like 2 months before I was homeless. So it was wild. And then it would have been a really bad day. But Melissa lives in Kentucky, and she was coming through Georgia, and I lived in Georgia at the time. So she's coming through a town like 45 minutes away. So I was like, oh, yeah, we should go meet up. So we met up. I mean, we've been like
Met up and had dinner and best friends ever since.
spiritual siblings ever since. Yeah, it's like instantaneously. And then she met my daughter, oldest daughter, a couple of years later. And it was like instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Same thing.
Same thing. And you took the only picture I had at the time of me and my daughters because I was always by myself. And I didn't have a way to really take a good one with me and them because no one else would take the picture. So we went to City Cafe in Chattanooga, me and my daughters and Melissa's husband, Chad. And then she took this really awesome picture of us at a place called City Cafe. So that was a divine connection. And we did a couple ministry things. We did Perry Stone has his fall. What does he call it? Fall festival?
Yeah, it's maybe just a fall festival or Pam's fall festival, but yes, it's actually, and what a perfect segue into the first viewers, or I guess audience. They can't see us. First audience submission for the dream. So the reason that I chose this one first was because of that outreach event that we did together. So it was on the Sabbath, and a lot of people were setting up there. A lot of people observe, a Sunday Sabbath. We observe a Sunday Friday on to, what did I say? A Sunday Friday. I'm listening at that, and that's recorded. That's on record.
Friday at sunset to Saturday.
I'm so embarrassed. If only you could see my red face now. But we were doing this, and we didn't want to sell anything, obviously, to honor Yahweh and honor the Shabbat. So we felt led to to give away tassels. So we created a cute little document, kind
of flyer, that little handout.
Yeah, that was illustrated with a story of the woman who grabbed Yeshua's tassel and was healed of the issue with blood. And then on the flip side, we share the actual commandments where it's written in scripture that we're to wear these tassels. And so we were just handing these things out right and left. And it was just such an amazing day. I will never forget that. We met so many people. We had an opportunity to pray over so many people. I mean, it was just, and then to look around and see so many of God's children with tassels. By far, I think that's the largest number of people I've seen in one spot with tassels to date.
Is that, and it's like identified, because in the ancient world, everybody had some kind of clothing that signified who their God was.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, it would be a ring or a necklace, an amulet, but you always knew who somebody's God was. And that's how the Israelites were marked, was that blue cord, because these Ten Commandments are supposed to be made of sapphire, and the high priest wore a completely blue garment, except on the Day of Atonement, or a largely blue garment. And then it's a very expensive dye. It's crazy expensive. So the people just had that one little thread of it. But they had that one little thread they put on their garments. And they all knew each other. You could identify who else was in covenant with their creator by that blue cord. And also the other nations knew, okay, you're representing Yahweh. And they might be representing their gods, but you are representing your God. And of course, you just spotting someone from a mile away is good. It's like you have t-shirts and things. You spot another believer. Walmart or something. It's like the instant bond. Especially in our society, everybody's so disconnected. You automatically know you have something in common with this person.
Like, hey,
like Jesus
there's a brother.
Exactly, like the Jewish people, the Kippah. It's like, oh, okay, I know. We have connection. And the more trouble the world gets in, it's more important to have your tribe.
Oh, for sure. So, with that segue, you'll pick up on in this first dream on why I chose this one first. But the title of this dream is called The Mountain, and it was submitted to us anonymously. So in reading kind of the notes here in the beginning, it sounds like this person had been just plagued by a series of nightmares, one after the other. And then it actually fell on the 8th great day, the last day of Sukkot, which for those of you listening who may not be familiar, this is one of the Sukkot is, or maybe better known as tabernacles, is one of the feast ordained by Yahweh, or one of his holy days. So this person,
last one of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the last 8th great day that this dream happened again after he or she had been plagued with nightmares. So it starts out, my family and I were in a small town. So this is the dream that was old, with many small brick stores, various municipal buildings, and diners. I remember walking into one of the buildings that looked like an old school auditorium. Once inside, we began to socialize with many other families. Some of these families dressed alike. Some looked alike, but all seemed to be somewhat friendly. After a short time, everyone began to leave this auditorium, and we began to say our goodbyes at our vehicles while standing in the parking lot. One by one, our family said goodbye. Some we connected with, some we were just cordial towards. But however, one large group of several families were leaving together in a caravan. They, for the most part, were a good connection for friendship, except for the people in the front leading the caravan. I had began my goodbyes and at the rear of this long caravan. And by the time we got to the front, some of the occupants in the other cars were following us towards the front, encouraging us to keep moving forward. Once we arrived at the leading vehicle, the people inside were nicely dressed, like in 50s style clothing. A gentleman asked me about my beliefs, and I told him, "Sir, my family and I are Jews, by choice first, and some by heritage." The man I spoke with had a huge smile on his face at this moment. Although even though he seemed quite friendly, I could not perceive his intentions. He quickly exited his large old car, smiling the entire time, walking towards me. A few others exited the car, both men and women, all of them coming towards me. The first man took out a long tallit, handed me the corner, and told me to grab onto this.
Tallit like a prayer.
Yes. I grabbed onto the tallit with the white tzitzit and quickly said, "Sir, we trust in Messiah." And I'm going to honor and respect how we're not going to get in the weeds on pronunciations, but he said Messiah, Yahushua. I'm sorry, do what?
So we would translate that as Yeshua or Jesus. Because we're all on the same page.
So we trust in Messiah, Yahushua, that he has come and will return. He is the Messiah. At this point, he stopped talking and kept smiling. Then I noticed the group following us, all of the men and women including my family, had on white and blue tallits with blue cords in their tzitzits. So already, and the first time I read through this, I'll be honest, I didn't catch it the first time I read through that this man leading them had a solid white one,
which is in Judaism,
and a white tzitzit, and these people following are Messianic. They have on the white and blue.
And Messianic means someone who believes the Messiah. They might have do Jewish things or appear to be Jewish, but they believe in Yeshua the Messiah, hence Messianic. And in normal Judaism, like Orthodox conservative reform, you just have a white tallit and a white tassel because they believe the commandment says blue, but they believe the actual snail they got the blue dye from it went extinct, so they can't reproduce it, so they don't try. So they just wear a white, it's the white one. And people that are Messianic generally wear the blue in it on their pants or on their. And if you see the blue one, this is someone that believes in Jesus or Yeshua or Yahushua. There are various pronunciations out there.
Yeah. So continuing on, they say, I again proclaimed Yahushua is the son of Yahuwah or Yahweh God. He is Messiah. The man that had been smiling then said, prove to me that what you say is true. I then noticed that we had walked up to the bottom of a huge mountain range. All of the people from the auditorium following me and this man that I'd been talking to. As we walked almost side by side, I began to notice that the winding pathway was leading upwards, and at a high point became very narrow and the rocks were slick. At a high point, the man stopped in front of me. He then said in a loud voice so that everyone walking with us could hear, prove to me what you say is true. Call out to your God Elohim and see if he answers you. I then turned toward the mountain directly across from us, looking at the height that we had reached, and I began to feel compelled to call out to Abba Yahuwah, not to prove anything to anyone, but out of a deep sense of emotion, love, fear, and need. It was so intense, I cannot explain it in words. I could not comprehend this immense feeling. Then I called upon Yahuwah, and it went something like this. Yahuwah, I trust in you. I believe you. I love you. You are my Father. You have saved me from death through your Son, Yahushua. I am so grateful. Please, I need you to reveal yourself today. Please, Abba, Yahuwah. I then became very weak, falling onto the ground, slipping on the narrow paths, wet rocks. I found myself holding on to the cliff along the edge of this path, dangling up in the air. Then some of the people that were with me began to approach me as to help me. However, the people began to slide on this path. So I said loudly, stay away from me, stay back, or we will all fall. Directly after saying these words, I began to gain strength, and I swung my legs back onto the cliff, and feeling a push from underneath me, I stood up on my feet on the path. Immediately, I walked back to where the old man had been standing. He looked directly at me, and I made eye contact with him. I was a bit shaken, but mostly because I felt the need to call out to Yahuwah again, and my emotions once again began to run past words that can't explain them. Before I could call out, the man said, stop. Look, you do not have to say anything more. He had a smile on his face, maybe what appeared to be tears in his eyes as he pointed toward the adjacent mountain. I then looked and I noticed a waterfall gushing outwards with great force. It was not there before, so I quickly began to praise Yahuwah. Then, without warning, several huge, wondrous waterfalls began to burst forth from this mountain with tremendous force, almost alarming to everyone as we all looked on in amazement. My feelings became overwhelming again as I heard the older man speak. Your father has answered you. You have told the truth. At this point, I began to realize that this man more than likely believed my words the entire time. He knew well before he ever met me that Yahuwah saves. I do not remember any of us leaving the mountains. A slight memory has us continuing our ascent. I woke up, tears in my eyes, and emotions running high. And I wrote this as my witness on the 8th great day. What a
Great.
dream.
And you usually know it's a God dream when it's this overwhelming. It's not 1,000% sure all the time, but it's most usually God just said something. Something just happened. You don't wake up and forget it in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
True.
like, boom, it hits you in your heart. Like when Pharaoh had a dream, it drove him so crazy he was going to kill it. Right? Or Nebuchadnezzar had a dream and it drove him so crazy. He's ready to kill all the priests and all the magi and all the magicians because they couldn't tell him what it meant. Probably all the psychologists back in his day too, because he covered all those different occupations. He just drove him crazy. And Pharaoh had the same thing, like demanding anyone in this entire country tell me what this means. So he had one of these dreams, which was, it hit home really hard. So that's a good indicator of a God dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He was so compelled to write this, he says, as a witness. I mean, man, just his word choice there, like you can hear the emotion and the connection in that this was substantial.
So with this dream, there's so much in it. There's so many biblical parallels because God speaks the language of Scripture. The more you know Scripture, the more you understand the language. So you see this Moses moment of going up a mountain. There's water from the rock. At the very end, when he, trying to preach Jesus, the Messiah, this water starts bursting from the rock. The rock's Messiah, and the water's the Spirit. And he had this Moses kind of moment going up the mountain, and all these parallels. So usually a God dream as well, you can see all these connections in Scriptures. Like it dings back to this and that, all these reference points. It's usually not a totally random thing. You'll see scriptural references because dreams are parallels, they're symbols, they're parables. So it's telling a story using the language of these symbols that you already know. So it started out when they're in a town. So they're amongst all these people. It's very modern. There's a period of separation. Like everyone there was separating themselves over time. So they went to an old school. It can be a play on words. Maybe traditional churches, maybe traditional synagogues, or just however their family raised them to believe and whatever system that was. But they're all learning because a school is a place you learn. Like in Hebrew thought, something's name doesn't make it exist. Its function does. Everything's about function. So we go to a school to learn. What do you do at school? You learn. Okay, in the dream, you go to a place where you're learning. You go to a place of learning. So they're all at this place and they're all learning together. And then they go make some friends. They have some fellowship, which is nice. Then they go to leave. When they go to leave, they move forward. They don't just, I'm learning stuff. I'm sitting here forever in this old school building. They learn forward and they go out away from the city. They go out kind of into the wilderness together. Then they have kind of a split. It almost sounds like a Moses Korah thing for a moment where they have the split, but over time, people recognize this kind of leadership gifting and this calling, and they urge him forward. Because you have a leadership gifting, you might have some opposition, but people around you will generally recognize it. They might not agree with you, but they'll recognize you're called to do something. They'll recognize your gifting. Like if someone can't sing, then not a lot of people, if you think you can sing, but no one else thinks you can sing, kind of a clue because your community gives you your mirror, gives you feedback. So I lived in Nashville and I found out really quickly I can't sing. Because everyone around me was at Belmont going to school to be a country music star. And I found out quickly that's not my calling. So, but when we do that, it helps us move forward. Like if we learn what we're not good at, we can focus on what we are good at, narrow things down. And his dream, the further he went, the more narrow things got. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to learn right now. I'm supposed to make friends with these people. And then it gets to the place of, okay, I'm supposed to advance in this. I'm supposed to move forward to more of a leadership position, to more of the front of the line. So he's making this progression and he meets someone who seems to be his friend, but also seems to be oppositional, which is kind of a hard thing to sort out. Okay, we both have prayer shawls. And he's being offered basically what we call Judaism today. It's we love God, but we don't believe in the Messiah. Because that blue cord is the distinction. And in dreams, you see why this, why not that. So the distinction between the two prayer shawls was the blue cord. So he's basically offered Judaism. He's like, okay, you can have God and you can have a normative religion that's accepted by everybody. It's perfectly normal and fine. Nothing strange about it. It's just being Jewish, which is, there's great Jewish people in the world. And I've studied Judaism a lot. I've learned a lot from Judaism. I've got
Same.
through the Judaism. So I'm absolutely appreciative of Judaism. But the Messiah comes down to being the distinction, the marker that's like, this is where we part ways. And you can, since if you keep the Sabbath and you don't eat pork and you keep all the festivals in the Bible, like Passover, Rosh Hashanah, it can be very tempting just to go into Judaism. It's like, oh, well, I fit right in. I already do this stuff. Because you feel kind of weird in church sometimes. Some churches embrace the Jewish feasts and things, the biblical feasts. Some of them don't. So you grew up in like a normative church, like in the 50s, everybody's dressed like the 50s at the front. The people in leadership already, when he got there, were dressed like the 1950s. It's like this might be your traditional Baptist church, Methodist church, traditional Jewish synagogue. I mean, this traditional way of doing things that's been done for centuries. And everyone of influence, everyone in leadership, everyone that chooses the leaders, they're all in this kind of mindset of the 1950s, 1940s. Traditional, this is the way we've always done things. Don't bring anything new in here. Don't bring anything strange in here. We just want to do it the way we've always done it. And the dreamer kind of runs into this. It's like, we like you. We're smiling at you. And I'm going to offer you a chance to join us in our traditional thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to leave behind the most important thing to do that. And then he's in a valley of decision. Okay, so I'm going to just find this place I belong, that's convenient, that makes sense, where I could be elevated in leadership and have this big following. Because the guy in front, he already had a long following.
Mm-hmm.
Just follow me, grab my tassel, follow me, and you'll have this big, long following pre-made. And you'll have a place you fit in, and you'll be one of us. Just you and your family just get absorbed into being one of us. But you have to give up, the thing that matters. And I don't think the man's necessarily asking the dreamer to give it up, but he's just making an offer. And the dreamer then presents with we believe in Yeshua, Jesus. I think he said Yahushua. There's multiple variants going around today. So he believes the Messiah. So it's like, oh no, wait, we already have what we believe. And I can't give that up to, be a part of your large following. And I can't give that up to fit in. And I can't give that up to have a leader over me and to be trained up in leadership by you. And, in traditional church, you walk into it, okay, if you got leadership giftings, they'll move you on up the ranks over time. You have someone mentor you, train you, be a guide for you, put you in charge of a church or something, or a synagogue, or whatever the belief system is. And you have a pre-made following that supports you. And your family have a place, everybody's like you, and everyone fits in. And he's kind of being offered this, but he's like, well, no, we already have ours. We have our hope in the Messiah. We have our blue cord.
Right.
The woman with the issue of blood grabbed on the Yeshua's tassels, Jesus' tassels, Yeshua's tassels, and she was healed because of her faith in him. She didn't grab a hold of the tassels of one of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, or, any of those other people. They all had prayer shawls on. She grabbed a hold of Yeshua's tassel. And in this case, instead of grabbing hold to what was established and convenient and traditional, the dreamer grabbed on to, he was holding on to something else. He was holding on to something that the person presenting the white prayer shawl didn't have. The white represents purity. So he had purity, but he didn't have basically the revelation. Blue is the color revelation or prophecy. In dreams, every color has two shades. The brighter color is the positive, the darker color is the negative aspect. So if a bright royal blue, like you see on tassel, would be like prophecy and revelation, because these come from the same place. Abraham's the first recorded prophet, or maybe it's not Enoch, but Abraham's the first prophet, and Abraham was a friend of God. So prophecy and revelation comes from this place of friendship with God. He tells you these things because you're his friend, and he can trust you, and you know his heart, and he knows your heart. More importantly, you know his heart, because ours usually aren't very trustworthy. So God's heart, and you can convey his heart. So that's why he tells you these things, because this friendship with God, this blue color. And this other person presenting in leadership party, he had purity, but he didn't have that revelation, that intimate relationship. Because in most religions, you can't have an intimate relationship with God. That's impossible. God's too big for that, or we're too messed up. But he's too big to have an intimate relationship with him. Or there is no God. You are God. You're too messed up for God, or God's too big for you. So like the faith with, believe in Jesus, Yeshua, Yahushua, there's different names for him. That's the only one where you can have an intimate relationship with God. And the dreamer couldn't give that up for this convenient, comfortable thing. So he's being tested in this. Like, this is your crossroads. This is your moment of decision. And also, he had to go a ways. He kept going through the ranks slowly. And he gets there. He makes this moment decision. Because you can be chosen. God can choose you, but sometimes you don't choose God. But he can choose you, but you can choose to do something else. But the dreamer chose God. So he keeps going, and this path gets very narrow, and he's by himself. And all these people start to follow him. But he's kind of brand new to this. He's just made his dedicated decision. And people are following him, which happened to me on Facebook, because I was like, oh, I found all this new information, all these, biblical feasts, and found out about the Sabbath, and I found out about this church history and this Jewish history, and I was just wanted to share because that's what I do. But if you're new to something, you're not supposed to be in leadership. Let you first be tested, and then you can be in leadership. You're supposed to be tested for a time before people follow you.
Yeah, that made me. You said something there that made me even think of the fruit trees. What is supposed to be the third year?
Third year, yeah. You don't just go up and eat it because it's bitter till the third year. And a lot of us go through that. We find out we come to something new, and we're kind of mad at everyone else that we feel deceived. Just like any of you just got saved in, being a Baptist church, a Methodist church, a Pentecostal church, or whatnot. You can be kind of mad at your friends who are all, trying to sell you drugs or hand you cigarettes or get you drunk, and they usually weren't ill-intentioned to you. They just didn't know any better.
Right.
They're just doing their life, and they want you to do life with you. And, you want to do life with them. This is what you do. And this is what everybody does. Because when God talked about Nineveh, he told Jonah, who was very self-righteous man, he's like, look, they don't know their right hand from their left. In Nineveh, I can't kill all these people who don't know any better. And some people say it was because there were so many children there. He didn't want to destroy Nineveh because they didn't know the right or left yet. Or maybe spiritually, they didn't know the right from their left. So God was saying, look, I know they've done terrible things, but they're completely in ignorance. And Jonah had to get over his bitter for a little bit. And when we get saved or we come to deeper knowledge of scriptures, we have to get over our bitterness before we can be in leadership. Because Korah was bitter. And see how that turned out. Absalom was bitter. Saul was bitter. And this is how it turns out over and over. Jezebel was bitter. Over in scripture. Bitter does not work out for people. So he has to go on. The dreamer has to go on by himself for a little bit. It's a slippery path. He's by himself. And he doesn't want other people following him down this slippery path. Like, if he falls, then they're going with him, basically.
Yeah.
I was hiking in Switzerland with some Army guys were leading us Air Force people and some other families from base on this kind of Christian guided tour. I wasn't a believer at the time, but they were navigators, which is a ministry group for people overseas, the military mostly. So they took us to Swiss Alps on 4th of July after my dad died, because he died the 4th of July previously. But we're going around this really icy slope, like, Lord of the Rings or something, around the mountain. And someone slips in the ice. It was like a glacier, it's like the side of a glacier. And they grabbed my backpack strap on the way down. And I started tumbling down with them right towards the end of the mountain. And thankfully, we both landed on a boulder. So nobody died. But they slipped. Their footing wasn't sure yet. They hadn't trained just like me. They hadn't been trained to walk over ice and rocks all day. So, because we don't do that in the Air Force so much. So they slipped and they grabbed my backpack on the way down, and I slipped too. And just because we weren't trained, we hadn't done this. We were new to this walk. We're new to this way of walking. And he's following right behind me, who doesn't know what he's doing either. Because I'm also new to this way of walking. I was just a little used to the hills more because I'm from Tennessee. Maybe he's from Kansas or something. But he slipped, and I went down with him because we're blind leading the blind, basically. Or he was walking behind me. And I didn't tell him, oh, wait, there's an icy spot right there. I didn't know enough experience to tell him what to watch out for. So he went down, I went down. It's bad. But the dreamer, he saw he was slipping, and he didn't want to have a following until he had sure footing. He didn't want to have a following. He was new to this way of walking. He didn't have sure footing yet. So he sent the people back. And God kind of honored that, Because once he realized he wasn't ready to lead just yet, that's when he ended up standing on his own 2 feet. He got sure footing. And then kind of was, after that, he was recognized as a leader. After he put the needs of the people above his own.
That's what I was about to say.
So,
Once he did the demonstration of their lives are more important than my own. I will fall, but you guys stay back. If you try to save me, we're all going to fall. We're all going to die. You guys stay back. Once he made that demonstration that their lives were more important than his own, I thought that was just a beautiful picture of how once he did that, he could stand on his own 2 feet.
There's humility to that. And then he moved forward with that. And we should all get help. We need help, but don't follow me while I'm still slipping and tripping and don't know where I'm going yet, kind of thing. And I just figured this out 6 months ago. So that's not a good time to start a ministry. That's what we all want to do, but it's not a good time to start a ministry. Like you said, 3 years to fruit trees. And the apostle said, don't put a new believer in leadership because he'll be puffed up with pride.
Mm-hmm.
And a prideful leader would be like, follow me right up this mountain. We can do it. And then everybody would fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And then the path got narrow. And then at some point, the Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua, all the different variants of his name, the Messiah, represented by the rock. And all these rocks started bursting forth water, which represents his spirit. It's like the spirit poured out on it after you passed all this. And depression is interesting because, I have depressive disorder. I'm diagnosed with major depression, and I have definitely lived with it for 40 years. And I think I actually got healed up to the last day of Tabernacles this year. So it's like a total miraculous thing with the depression, anxiety on the last day of Tabernacles, just like
like this dream.
Just like that dream. And I was really sick for 3 weeks. I thought I was going to die. I was pretty convinced of it. And it was really physically sick. I didn't eat for 3 weeks, solid food for 3 weeks. And I got healed on the last day of Tabernacles. So it was crazy, miraculous thing, similar to the dream, that kind of dark place, that valley decision where you think you're going to fall off and die. I was like physically living some of that. But the end of it, the water burst forth. The spirit was poured out on him and these other people. So I wonder if it could be a call to Jewish evangelism.
That's true. That's true.
Because he got to a certain point, the spirit started pouring out on him, all the believers, but also on the people that weren't believers in the mountain next door.
True. And the leader recognizes it. The man who had led him up the mountain for the testing recognizes it. He's like, look, you don't have to call out again. Look, your God answered you.
Mm-hmm. It's like Elijah and the prophets of Baal. There's Moses and Korah, but there's all these different parallels. But like you said, the man was kind of testing him, and it could have been Yeshua. It's possible. It could have been Jesus, because we have the angel, and some people say it was Jesus himself, Yeshua himself, appeared to Joshua. And he's like, well, whose side are you on? He's like, I don't know anybody's side. I'm on God's side. Are you on God's side, or are you on someone else's side? Because Joshua was asking, are you for me or are you for my enemies? And it's like, those are human issues. We've got bigger fish to fry here. Whose side are you on? Are you on God's side or against God's side? Because I'm on God's side. And that's like a testing of sorts. Like, where's your loyalty towards your nationality, your tribe, your religion, your people, your country, or is your loyalty to your creator? And so it could have been like a testing trip, but the man was smiling at him the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like a menacing thing. It wasn't like an enemy thing. And having this prayer shawl was like, can be kind of a, hey, I want you to follow me, but could also have been an offer of leadership. And so it was, it's hard to say for sure if that was Yeshua or not, but it was definitely a testing. But, the dreamer didn't want to take leadership until he was ready. And that's a big thing too, because when Moses went up to Mount Sinai by himself. Before he went to get the children of Israel, Moses went to Sinai by himself, saw the burning bush by himself, and then he sent his wife and children away, and then he went to Egypt to go rescue his people. But he's trying to lead these people who hadn't seen what he had seen. He saw a burning bush. They had never seen a burning bush before. So Moses had to experience this himself before he went to get back and go find other people. Moses had to literally walk around the desert by himself for 40 years. before he led the people to the desert for 40 years. Because Moses left Egypt and he saw like the burning bush at 80, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then led the children of Israel wandering around the desert for 40 years, and he died at like 120. So he literally had to walk the desert for 40 years before he went and got his people. Then they all walked the desert for 40 years. But he had to see the burning bush first before he got to other people. Does that make sense? Or is that?
Oh no, that makes perfect. That makes perfect sense. I mean, one, that's a great example and illustration of when Moses had fled from Pharaoh, and he was wandering around. That's a great example for us. We never know what we're going through in our day-to-day lives. That is boot camp for something that God can use us for later on when the time is right. So that makes perfect sense. And then two, with Moses seeing that burning bush for himself, he had to go through that experience before he could lead the people.
And John Paul Jackson had a good video commentary on Moses and Joseph too. But Moses is called 6 Signs of a Rising Warrior, and that's on YouTube he had. And one was thinking they could do it on their own by themselves, and they find out the hard way they can't. Because they have the mission, they have the vision, save the people. Like Moses, I'm going to save the people. I'm going to kill this Egyptian that's beating this Hebrew slave.
You know what? I never put that together. You are exactly right. He had the mission from the first day.
Exactly, and I didn't realize that. Like John Paul Jackson's this whole thing on the Rising Warrior was like, Moses tried to do it himself. It didn't turn out well. He tried to do it himself. He had to run away in the desert because he's trying to do the mission by himself. Wow. And then he comes back because God sent him back. He didn't decide on his own to go to Egypt. Like, I'm 80 now. I better do this before I die. God sent him back to Egypt. And this time he tells God, I'm not going unless you're with me. Because the first time he's all gung-ho. At 40, he's going to do it on his own. And then when he's 80, he's like, I'm not going unless you go with me. And then God went with him, and the whole place crumbled down. He literally overthrew an old 80-year-old man in a bathrobe with a broom handle. Overthrew the largest empire the world had ever known at the time. The military economic superpower got overthrown by 80-year-old man in a pair of Birkenstocks and a bathrobe. So it was this is how God works, It's not, I'm going to get you a giant army and you're going to march in there. Because that's what the Israelites expected. And John Paul Jackson also pointed out, like, their army got killed. Their army was drowned in the Nile River as infants. Because they knew there's a prophecy of 400 years. And when this 400 years is up, we're getting out of here. So we just have enough babies. We can have a large, in 20 years, have a big enough army. We'll just overthrow these guys. Well, their entire army got drowned. So there's no physical hope or possibility of getting out of this thing. And Moses means drawn out of the water. He should have been drowned too. He literally put a casket and sit down a river full of crocodiles. Mm-hmm. And but he got miraculously saved out of it. And 40 years later, tried doing it on his own. And 80 years later, did it with God. Mm-hmm. But it's there was no natural hope though. He couldn't do it on his own. And like in the dream, like the dreamer would rather just die than take people with him. And he kept calling out to God, like, I can't do this on my own. And I think the dreamer reached a point in his life where he realized that. Because we see people who are like, they're a pastor at 20, and we're all kinds of jelly about it. And we think we wasted our life. Oh, God, I'm 41 right now, and I haven't done anything completely very significant. So I think I blew my whole life. But Moses didn't start until he was 40. So that gives me a little hope. Well, Moses didn't run out of Egypt until he was 40. He didn't get started until he was 80. But we have to reach that point of we're not going to do it on our own before we can actually be effective at anything.
Wow. Yeah. What a great dream, and what an amazing interpretation. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I've been kind of sitting here taking some notes through all of this, and I am just mind blown. So I cannot wait until we can get some feedback from the actual dreamer, mm-hmm. because I just feel it in my heart and in my spirit that, again, test everything. God's language is the scripture. The parallels that you pointed out between this dream and the scriptures, I mean, there were too many. I had to just stop writing them down. There were so many. And I mean, that's proof.
Oh yeah, because the God thing is, I looked at it right beforehand, and I'm like, I've got nothing. So you just okay, God, you better do something. I'm gonna look ridiculous right now. So and it started ding, ding, ding. These puzzle pieces start coming together.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's how you know that it's not just the training you've had. That's the Ruach. That's the Holy Spirit revealing that to you, through the Spirit, to let you give these interpretations. And that's one of the things that I really feel like, sets you apart from someone who's just gone through a class. You can hear your interpretations, you can test it to scripture, and you know that it's true because they line up.
As I always tell people, I'm a teacher, not a prophet. But if God can breathe on anybody or anything, but I'm normally expect some giant prophecy. I can teach you the principles. These what these symbols mean. And God might breathe something else into that to me, or He might breathe it right into you. I just give you the one meaning, and the whole puzzle piece comes together. It's like you're doing a puzzle, and you find that one piece, and the rest of it makes sense.
Right.
And sometimes the basic teaching dreams kind of thing is just that one piece that gets everything else going, or gives a person confidence enough. Okay, this is not some indecipherable code. God can show me this. I understand a little tiny bit of it. He can show me the rest. It's not just a nudge to go forward. But sometimes God's totally on it, and from the reaction of the dreamer. It's not like a totally random thing to you, and then someone's crying and bawling and hugging you. It's like, okay, that must have been the correct interpretation. Because they just look at you funny, and then you probably got it wrong, and you feel it inside. You just thinking, like, I don't think that was right. So if you're interpreting for people, always have a caveat: pray about this, study this, get some witnesses on this. Because when John Paul Jackson died, John E. Thomas took the ministry over, Streams Ministries, and he has this video called "How Do You Know If a Dream is from God?" Because it's a really big question. But he says God usually speaks in multiple ways. Like He'll give you the same kind of dream with the same message over and over. Or you might get a prophetic word. You might have a vision. You might have a nudge in your spirit. And like my pastor Jonathan Brown always says that the community is usually the ultimate verification. Like at the end of the day, run it by your community. Run if you think you're supposed to do something or you have a dilemma, run it by, get the wisdom of the people in your religious faith community that are respected. Like go to the elders. Like Moses, that wasn't given a vision about what to do with the Israelites grumbling against each other. He went to Jethro, who was the elder in his community, and he's got some good practical wisdom. It wasn't a pillar from the sky that God spelled out what to do in Hebrew letters in the cloud. I mean, he just went to Jethro, and Jethro told him. So sometimes there's verification of people in your community. And the Remnant Radio guys, they're always talking about people get prophetic word, like the people who think they have some kind of prophecy to share to the world, on YouTube or something, they should go to their church leadership and everybody, because Paul talked about test these things, pray these things out, run it by people well. Even the Apostle Paul went before the other apostles. He wasn't freelancing it either. So it's really important to get not just like my interpretation, but pray about it, study about it, ask for more, God to speak to you more ways about it, and then seek your community, people you respect in your community that have some good understanding.
I just love listening to you talk. You were talking about, taking it to the elders and not going out just prophesying and giving interpretations. And I just had this like guerrilla prophet.
That could be a logo for some kind of ministry. Guerrilla prophet.
Oh my gosh, you cracked me up. But so again, we've been on here just almost an hour, so we'll try to wrap up this first episode. I do want to mention to everybody, if they've stayed on with us this long, I'm sure they have been blessed by this and they've enjoyed listening to your interpretation. I do expect audience submissions to go up after this point. So gosh, I'm so excited for next week. But again, I want to drive people to your website. Your website is shalomtoyourheart.com. Also, you have a YouTube, Shalom to Your Heart. You can find Brian there as well. As far as Facebook pages, it's just our personal pages, Brian Asriel Newman. And then my name is Melissa Collins. If you feel led to give to Brian, again, he spends a ton of time doing ministry work with websites. providing people with resources. He has a special divine gifting, not just for biblical dream interpretation, but also for connecting people. So he is just a wonderful resource. So if you feel led to give to Brian, his PayPal is shalomtoyourheart@gmail.com. And then you can also reach Brian or I at that email address as well, shalomtoyourheart@gmail.com. So one of the things I would love to do, Brian, if you feel led, I'd love to end every podcast with a prayer. Would you be so kind to close us out? And I think I may have lost Brian. Brian, are you still with us?
I'm still here. I'm on the phone. I'm on the calling in on the phone, and someone tried to call me, so apparently it shuts the audio off.
I put you on the spot to pray, and we had crickets.
Yeah, I also do that. That's like, hi everybody. I don't know what to pray. Okay, so maybe it's a sign you should do it. Bishop. So Yahweh is the Hebrew name of God, or something close to that. No one knows for sure, and we say Yeshua a lot, but Yeshua is Jesus in Hebrew. So Yahweh, I ask you to bless everyone on the receiving end of this podcast, and on my co-host Melissa and myself, and our children and our families, and ask you to give us all dreams from you, and to give us the interpretation of these dreams from you, and to let us know they are from you. And any other dreams, let us know that's our soul, our mind, will, and emotions, or our flesh, which is just our biology, or our environment, or sometimes even from the enemy. Just let us know where these dreams we have are coming from, and what they mean, and what we should do with them. In Yeshua's name. And shalom to your hearts.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. That was beautiful. So